All right, today's assignment or lesson or um, subject matter is conte. Conte is also called conte crayon, was invented by George Conte. Actually, I'm sorry, Nicholas Conte. Back in 1795 as a replacement for graphite or lead because that was in short supply because of the Napoleonic Wars. So, what I'm going to do my conte, I'm going to do two drawings. The first one is, here's a little flower pot from our garden. And I'm going to start with the vine charcoal. Conte is not so easy to erase. So instead, I'm going to start with the charcoal. I'm going to measure my pot. Its height versus its width. It's twice as wide as it is high by my measurements. So I'm going to start with a rectangle that you could say twice as wide as it is high. So if it's the height of my vine charcoal, then I'm going to make it twice as long as that. So there we go. Just a quick little. Why am I starting with vine charcoal? Because vine charcoal is much easier to erase. Okay, and then I'm going to measure the pot again. I'm going to assess how big the opening is. The opening is about a quarter of the overall height. Right? So if I measure this, it's in half, and then a quarter, then my opening is going to be just like the bowl we did with in our last lesson. All right. I measure the edges. We have this beautiful rim on here. And the bottom of the rim is going to emulate this curve here. These are two curving parallel lines, you could say. I'll measure its shape. It has a nice foot in it. Put down a foot here. The foot is basically two ellipses, interestingly enough. So 1 and 2. And then the nice curve of the bowl. All right, so there's a line drawing of my bowl that I'm going to do. Now this first drawing, I'm just going to use the conte, or in other words, just the this sort of terracotta color. Conte is a combination of clay, graphite, and cellulose acetate. The cellulose acetate is as a binder to keep it from falling apart, you could say. Different binders are used. Gum arabic is a common binder used in pastels, for example. Now light's coming in like this, so I have a shadow on this side. So I'm going to use this as value. I'm just looking where the shadows are at or where the darker values are at. So I'm just using this one conte, in other words. I'm not using any of the other colors. I'll do another one later on in black and white. Light's coming in, the inside is in the shadow because light's coming from this direction, and this is in the light. This starts to curve around into the shadow. So conte is prized, or artists like conte for a number of reasons. One is because it's thought to be less messy than pastels. So if you want to use it for color, they use it as an underdrawing for paintings. It works really well for that, combined with oil paints. It's cheap and abundant. And it's doesn't have as much dust associated with it as other drawing mediums. So part of the scope of this class, the drawing class, is to introduce you to different drawing materials. And conte is a very widely used and commonly known material used by artists. And also they like it for its warmth. There's a nice sense of warmth to a drawing when you do it with conte, as opposed to using something like graphite or charcoal or pen and ink or any of those other drawing materials. So there we go. There's my bowl so far. And you can kind of see how it's coming along. It has a nice warm color from the conte. Now the conte gets its color from the clay that's used. The British were blockading the French port during the Napoleonic Wars, so graphite was not available for that reason. So they had to rely on other cheap materials that were abundant, and clay was one of those things that's abundant. A little shadow here. So that's what they came. That's what Nicholas or Jacques. I think it's Nicholas. I think it's Nicholas Conte. I've given him 3 names so far, but you can always look it up. All right. This is nice. I like this drawing. So this is, again, we're using all the same principles we've been covering, like line, value, light versus shadow. You know, lighter values come forward, darker values recede. All right. I could stop. You know, the question is, well, how do you know if a drawing is done? Sometimes I get that question, and the answer for me is, well, I think when you like it, you're finished. So I already like this, but I think I can go further with it. I don't like to overwork things, though I do on occasion. When something's not working, I'll overwork it. But, you know, you learn something from everything you do, so even when you don't get the result you hoped for, still, you learn something from that experience. So this edge will be slightly darker. Your light usually, your highlight or your lightest part of an object is rarely ever at the edge of the object. It's usually inside from the edge. It'd be in here, in this area. And by making the edge a little darker, of course, it gets that edge to curve away. You don't just want a line there. You want that the rim of the object, in this case the ball, curving away from you. All right, so there's my drawing in Conte. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do another video using my other values. All right, there we go. Conte crayon.